It is 6 degrees out here this morning. In fact, it's been under 15 degrees for the last 24 hours. And so what is a reasonable, sane person like myself doing out here in the cold? Well, I thought it might be interesting to pull out a thermal imager and show you how the RV is faring out here in the cold. And I also want to have a conversation about four-season, in quotes, RVs. Now I've got to put a face mask on because I think with the wind chill it's minus 10 degrees. But if you're not already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because after all, what other channel gives you this kind of quality entertainment while temperatures are in the single digits, right? Well, all jokes aside, if you're one of my subscribers, you probably know that I don't keep my RV winterized, mainly as it usually doesn't get this cold in Georgia in the winter months. And then of course we still use the RV in the winter months. In fact, we'll be taking it out on a trip here in just a few days actually. But anyway, over the last 5 years or so, I've become intrigued and fascinated to a certain degree with building science. And it all started when I built this barn here about 5 years ago, and I started following a builder out of Texas by the name of Matt Reisinger. He's got a really interesting channel here on YouTube. But being an RVer, I've always kind of wondered how some of the same modern building science that applies to homes and, you know, permanent residential structures, how those same principles could potentially apply to RVs. And so I did a video about a year ago on sealing the underbelly of my RV here. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. But today I want to make a full circle back to RV manufacturers advertising and rating RVs as four-season approved or four-season tested. And I thought, what better way to demonstrate than to pull out a thermal imager when it's, 6 degrees outside, right? So let me quickly give you the vitals of the RV and then I'll pull out the thermal imager. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but on top of the RV here, I've got 3 different rooftop ACs. And the third one back there is actually a heat pump, but they don't work great under 45 degrees on RVs at least. And so over the last 24 hours, I've been running on nothing but the propane furnace right here. It's a 40,000 BTU furnace, and that is all that I've been using to keep the RV heated. And I've got several temperature sensors inside the RV. I'm using the BM Pro app here, and you can see I've got the main thermostat set to 62 degrees, and the temperature sensor there, it's right by the entry door in the hallway, is registering 61 degrees. Then I've got another temperature sensor up in the front bedroom here, up in the nose of the fifth wheel, and you can see that one is registering 74, and that's mainly because there's a heat register on the floor right below it, and so it's blowing hot air on that sensor and kind of giving it a little bit of a false reading there. And then of course I've got a third temperature sensor for the third AC. It's right next to the first, so it's registering pretty much the same. But check out here on the sensor page, of course you can see on the TPMS, the tire pressure sensor, that one's registering 9. Sometimes I find them not to be 100% accurate, but that's probably pretty close. And then you can see down here, I've got one in the refrigerator. The refrigerator's not on right now, so the door's kind of open. It's registering 63. Temperature 1 is in the mid bunk, kind of off to the side here. This middle slide right here, it's in that room. Because the slide is closed right now, there's more heat concentrated in that room than normal. And it also is kind of positioned where the heat blows on the sensor, so it gives it a false reading, a little bit higher than normal. But then check out this one here, enclosed underbelly rear, and that one is registering 32 degrees. Now you might be wondering, where is that sensor? It is about right here in the main I-beam section, right behind this I-beam essentially, really where it's most vulnerable, right on the edge of that I-beam. And so it's registering 32, which is kind of abnormal for me. I mean, I have never had the RV not winterized in temperatures this cold. So to see it 32 registering on that one temperature sensor is kind of unusual for me. So you might be wondering, are your water lines frozen over yet? And I've actually got some fresh water in the tank and the water pump on, so let's go ahead and check it out and see if we've got running water still. Go here in the bathroom, and so far we are still good. Now you might be wondering, how is it that your water lines and your water tank aren't frozen over, given that the temperature sensor down here in the underbelly is registering 32 degrees. In fact, last night I saw it drop to 30 degrees. And I think the explanation is, you know, that temperature sensor is literally just on the other side of the I-beam right here. So there is nothing but the I-beam and then the temperature sensor. And I think it's kind of like a giant cooling fin, that I-beam. And the temperature sensor is probably picking up a little bit colder temperature in the extremes on the outer edges of the RV compared to what it's like on the inside of the RV there where the water lines are. And so I think that's partially to explain why that temperature sensor is reading a little bit cooler than normal. But I also have another temperature sensor, an independent one from the BM Pro system that's just inside my basement storage here, where, you know, probably 80% of the vulnerable water lines and tanks are. And it's got a really nice graph. You can kind of see what it's been like for the last 24 hours or so, and that one has dropped to really at the lowest point, right about 35 degrees, and so we are above freezing officially. All right, so those are the vitals. Now, in full transparency, this is absolutely the coldest that it's ever been with my RV not winterized. I mean, normally I don't have to keep the inside of my RV, you know, 60 degrees on the thermostat to keep that underbelly above freezing. I mean, normally I can keep it closer to about 50 degrees. But basically I'm seeing firsthand, kind of learning here, that the relationship between the temperature in the underbelly down here to keep it above freezing versus the temperature in the main living space, it's not a linear relationship, but rather there's some kind of curve. And so the colder that it is outside, then the warmer that I've got to keep it inside in the living space to kind of bleed off that heat into the underbelly. All right, so I've got the thermal imager running now. I'm going to try to sync up the video so you can see them side by side here. But we'll just kind of walk around and make some observations. Now, I'll just say in full disclosure, this thermal imager is not a professional model. I mean, it's a real basic one. And so I think it's going to lack a little bit in terms of the detail and the focus, but I think it'll accomplish really the purpose that I'm trying to do here today. So let's start on the front cap here. You can see in the center of the thermal image is a temperature marker there, the crosshairs, and that's just what it's picking up in the middle. So right at our front cap, we're right at about 20 degrees on the outside. It gets a little bit warmer at the top naturally as heat rises. But then notice how down here the generator is a lot cooler down here because it's not heated, but it's still pretty warm. I guess kind of bleeding off of the underbelly heat there. Let's go down the side here and give you a look. You can see the structure, some of the studs and kind of that heat transfer on the studs there. It's kind of interesting. And then notice with the windows, so these are not insulated windows, but they are dual pane glass. So we've got 24 degrees on the window versus on the body 15, so about a 10-degree difference on those windows. So that's certainly all that heat inside. Remember, it's about 60 degrees inside bleeding to the outside. We'll kind of work our way down here. This is the underbelly, of course, and it's registering right about 20 degrees, but notice around the perimeter of that door we're getting a little bit warmer signal there picking up naturally because that gasket is only so tight. And again, notice the structure. You can see the aluminum stud. It's always amazing to me on a laminated wall like this one here, how few studs there actually are, and it's still, you know, really strong. Same thing with the window, like we'd expect. Quite a bit warmer coming out of the window here. Let's keep working our way down. This is the outside kitchen right here. And so notice again, just that difference in temperature right here. I guess that would be the structure of the RV coming across here and transferring some heat. Yeah, that's what that looks like there. So that's kind of interesting. And then let's take a look here at the entry door. Again, right around the perimeter, you can see that heat loss, the difference. You know, we're looking at 24 degrees, 25 versus 15, so about a 10-degree difference. So there's some air leakage going around that door. And then of course the glass, same story there. And then let's hop over here. There's a TV right here, an outside TV. So we're registering about 13 degrees, again, right at the edge, the perimeter, some heat loss. And then going up here, two more big windows, 21 degrees versus 15. So it seems like consistently the windows are about 10 degrees warmer compared to the rest of the body. And again, these are dual pane windows, so that's kind of interesting. And notice I've got the slide shut here. I did that because, you know, it's in storage. I want to be able to give you all a view here, but I did leave one slide open on the other side that I'm going to show you, and I think that'll be kind of interesting to see what kind of leakage we're getting around. But I mean, yeah, check out the leakage around the doors. You know, those gaskets probably could be fine-tuned a little bit so that that kind of leakage is not occurring, but not too bad. We'll kind of go down the other side and pan and then walk around to give you another idea of what we're looking at here. Again, on the front cap, the sun is starting to come out, so it's probably going to start warming that up. But yeah, I mean, we're registering right about 10 degrees on the front, and then as we go up, heat rises naturally. It gets a little bit warmer up there. Let's hop over to this side though and kind of look down the side of the RV. Very interesting. All right, so this is the slide that I've got out. This is in the front bedroom. And so notice that the slide wall, the temperature here, we've got 9 degrees on the side wall of the RV, and then on the slide, it's a little bit cooler at 6 degrees. So it's a little bit more extreme, a little bit further out. So that is to be expected. And then check out the window here on the side. We've got about 20 degrees. That seems to be pretty consistent. Same thing up there. That window's a little bit lower. But yeah, really interesting to see the structure, those studs, how they transfer energy. Well, we got disconnected there for a minute. I'm not sure if it got too cold or what happened there, but I want to try to finish showing you this side and then the underbelly and the roof. Check out though on this front slide, you can see a little bit of that air leakage around the perimeter. It's not too bad though, considering all things. Looks like we're about 28 degrees or so there versus the body being about 21. So that's a pretty tight bulb seal. This is kind of more like a box slide where all the way around there's a bulb seal, I think. Compared to these other two slides, the mid-bunk slide and the kitchen one, those are gonna be not a flush floor, but just kind of where there's rollers and a flap. I bet you if we had these out, we would see some pretty serious heat loss at the bottom there. Check out, you can see that hot spot there with the furnace running. It's on right now, so that's the exhaust. It's pretty hot coming out of there. And then of course you've got your seal around this slide here. So even with that one shut, those are bulb seals as well, I think. Still getting a little bit of a heat loss. You can see the structure on the side of the RV there. Pretty interesting, again, just how few studs there are, the way they're laminated. Then over here we've got the refrigerator access compartment. So again, a little bit of heat loss right there. Pretty interesting to see just what's going on. Then up above we've got the exhaust for the microwave, the range up there. A little bit of heat loss on that, just a plastic part. And then kind of going down the sides here. So pretty interesting. Let me show you the underbelly, because after all, this is something that those who are subscribers, you know that I've sealed up my underbelly, and I'm kind of curious what it looks like down there. So let me see if I can get you a good shot. All right, so we are registering 15 degrees. And notice how around the perimeter, I mean, that's where really most of the ceiling is. There's not a whole lot of leakage, surprisingly. And so, you know, just imagine if that zip tape wasn't there sealing up the underbelly, I bet you there would just be tons of heat loss all the way around coming out of the sides there, because I mean, there were some gaping holes before I sealed up that underbelly. So that's pretty interesting. Let me show you up on top real quick, see what the roof looks like. So here we are on the roof, and it's registering quite a bit colder up here. So that tells us that the roof is probably insulated the best out of everything. You can barely make out some of the structure, the trusses there on the roof. Well, anyway, sorry guys, the thermometer keeps dropping out right after about 5 minutes. I'm not sure if it doesn't like the cold out here or what, but I think we got a pretty good idea of the RV overall. I mean, I was kind of surprised actually in some areas where I thought it would be, there'd be more leakage, with the heat that it wasn't quite as bad as I thought. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can do in terms of R value when you're dealing with a 2-inch thick wall here. Compare that to, on my barn over here where I've got a 2x6 wall that's got, spray foam open cell in there. So quite a big R value difference. I mean, I don't know that Jayco officially advertises their R thickness, their R value. It's probably around an R5 is my guess. Whereas, like over here on the barn with the open cell at, 6 inches deep, it's probably closer to an R22. So quite a big difference there. But anyway, back to manufacturers, advertising 4-season coaches, or even advertising that they've tested them down to 10 degrees or, 0 degrees. I want to be clear that I'm not alleging that the manufacturers are making false claims when they say those things. But rather, I think it's a disconnect in how the units are being tested in those testing environments versus the real world use by folks like us, real RVers. And so the first problem is, and I'm not a full-time RVer in full disclosure, but I don't know any full-time RVer that keeps their RV furnace set to 72 degrees when the outside temps are, under freezing. It's just not cost effective. I mean, just in the last 24 hours alone to do this experiment here and to keep my RV at 60 degrees inside, I've probably spent, $30 alone in propane just in the last 24 hours. And again, that's only a modest 60 degrees or so on the inside. But typically manufacturers, they're testing their units with the furnace set closer to 72 degrees. And so basically that means that the propane furnace there is going to be running pretty much nonstop. And I mean, I don't know if you can hear in the background, it's cycled on and off a few times while I've done the recording here. But in those tests that the RV manufacturers are running, it's constantly pumping hot air into the RV, including those ducts that ultimately bleed into the underbelly, where your water lines and your tanks are, the vulnerable pieces of equipment. And so if you've got a constant flow of hot furnace air pouring into those areas, then it's not too difficult to keep everything from freezing because, again, you've got a 40,000 BTU furnace, and that's a pretty powerful appliance. But the moment that your furnace stops dumping hot air into the RV, then that's when the overall insulation package and the R values really come into play with RVs. And I see a lot of full-time RVers that post online about being frozen out, having their water lines and their tanks frozen, yet they own these same RVs that are 4-season that have been tested down to perhaps 0 degrees. So how is this possible? I mean, how is it that the same RVs that are advertised as tested down to 0 degrees, how come they're not actually performing that way in real life, right? And it really comes down primarily to the furnace here. It's not running 100% of the time. That's the disconnect, I believe. RVers aren't running the propane furnace all the time because it's expensive. It's not cost effective. And so we run electric heat, right? We run the electric fireplace that we have in our living rooms in the RV. We run some space heaters, maybe portable ones in the RV. But oftentimes those electric sources of heat, they're not dumping that hot air into the most vulnerable sections of your RV, such as your underbelly. And so that's why things start to freeze up, even though you're living, comfortably perhaps in a 60 to 65 degree environment inside. And I mean, think about it, there is a thin sheet of corrugated plastic down there sealing up your underbelly. Maybe a fiberglass bat, depending on the manufacturer, or in my case, a reflective barrier. But there's still a lot of penetrations, even in the I-beam for the slide rams, for water lines, gas lines, things like that. Lots of penetrations, and there's probably no insulation along the side of that I-beam. And so it's no wonder that the heat in the RV is just kind of leaking out of that underbelly. And again, there's only so much you can do when you got 2-inch thick walls, even 3-inch thick walls. Then of course you got skylights on top of your RV, you got rooftop vents, right? Thin layers of plastic, and that's all that's separating the inside from the outside. So it's really no wonder. I mean, imagine, like I said earlier, what would it look like on the underbelly if I hadn't sealed up mine around the edges. I mean, that heat would just be leaking and dumping out like crazy around the perimeter. Well, anyway, it is still 6 degrees outside, so I'm gonna go back inside to try to warm up. But I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear from you either way in the comments below. So let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching.